This is Saira Iqbal Khan from the Office of Corporate Linkages and Placements. I welcome you all to another exciting episode of the podcast, which is brought to you by OCLP Digital. And the purpose of this podcast, as you know, is to provide a platform for both industry and academia to share their perspective, understand each other's expectations, and join hands together so that interventions of consequence can be created. So today we have invited another personality of eminence, Dr. Tahir Mahmood Hayat, who is basically the Chief Executive Officer at Deamir Bhasha Consultant Groups. And before we dive into the discussion with him, I would like to quickly give his abridged profile for the understanding and awareness of everybody. So Dr. Tahir Hayat is the Chief Executive Officer of Deamir Bhasha Consultant Groups, which is a joint venture of the 3 foreign and 3 local firms providing consultancy services for the Deamir Bhasha Dam, which is of strategic and national importance. Dr. Tahir has distinguished academic and professional career. He earned the bachelor degree with honors from Engineering University, Lahore. He was awarded with the Tim Kendall Memorial Prize at AIT Bangkok for his master's degree, and during his PhD, he received the Ralph Peck Fellowship Award at the University of Illinois. He has made significant intellectual impact through more than 15 outstanding publications in international and national journals and conferences, and his work has been referenced in foreign textbooks as well. He's listed in the Who's Who in Science and Engineering Millennium Edition and is a member of the Honor Society, USA. NESPAC awarded him the Irshad Ahmed Gold Medal in 2006 for outstanding performance. In view of his professional excellence and contribution to the nation, the government of Pakistan awarded him the Pride of Performance in 2020.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, sir, and how is life going? How are you?
Alhamdulillah ji.
And we are really grateful to you that you have joined us today for the podcast.
I am honored to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, thank you. Moving forward, I would also quickly brief my co-host for the session, who is Mr. Khalid Naqi. Mr. Khalid Naqi is basically a corporate Olympics champion and an experienced enterprise management professional, having over 30 years of diversified international and local experience in multi-disciplinary industries and various asset classes. He is also heading the Department of Office of Corporate Linkages and Placements at UMT, and he is also the Chief Transformation Officer of our think tank initiative of Innovation Capital Development Forum, ICDF. So Assalamu alaikum, sir. Hope you are also good.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah, I'm fine, very good. We are all looking at Dr. Saab for his inspiring thoughts and solutions, what solutions he recommends as keeping in view the emerging workscape, which is post-COVID scenario. So we are waiting for and desperately, eagerly waiting to hear his thoughts.
Sure. So, sir, you are ready because very challenging questions are going to be asked to you.
I'm not sure I'm ready or not, but I'll try to answer these questions that you're going to put through to me.
All right. So, as I briefed you earlier, that the first section is basically a rapid fire. So, 2 options will be given to you, and you will be requested to choose the option which you think is close to your heart and you agree to that statement.
Okay.
All right? So the first statement is, engineering is just another field, or engineering is the backbone or core to solve all current and emerging complex and societal challenges of IR 4.0.
The second one, it's the backbone and core to solve all current and emerging complex challenges that we face. Because an engineer, I would like to a little bit go into this, because he has a logical mind. So he applies logic to all the challenges that he faces in life, and he comes to a logical conclusion, and that is what is required. So it's not just another field, it gives you that, it mentors you to face the challenges of life and come to a good solution to any problem that you face in life.
All right, great. Second, engineering education needs to be focused only on classroom learning, or engineering education to be designed as a more hands-on discipline?
The second one is better, but I would like to add a little bit to it.
Sure.
That it's not only engineering education, it's education as a whole, because I think the essence of education is to make you a better human being. It's not only that you become a better engineer or you become a better doctor or something like that, but you become a better human being. So whatever education you are getting in whichever field you are, and you are lucky to be in engineering field because it has all the advantages. So so it enhances your capabilities, but then it is more than that.
No doubt about it. Third one is better to comply with regulators and accreditation bodies, or have the desire and guts to challenge the frameworks to come up with the emerging disruptions.
It is a challenge. You see, in the short term, you have to comply with regulators and accreditation bodies. That's the short-term answer, because you cannot do without that. It is a compulsion. But yes, you should have the guts and the desire to challenge them in the long term and change the whole paradigm. Not go into the rut of the same thing, but challenge the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. Next, blend of theory and practice, the only solution for producing trained engineering workforce from universities, or complying with prefixed disintegrated roadmaps?
I think it is tied up to the previous question to a little extent. I think the first one, it's a blend of theory and practice, and that is a wholesome. It's not only your engineering theory and your engineering practice, but as a whole, what is your role in the society? That comes to work.
Sure. Next, making STEM education mandatory from the grassroots, means school level as a national policy, or preferring to keep struggling with widespread skilled and trained talent shortage?
I'm not very sure I understand this correctly, but can you
I can elaborate
a little bit more on that?
Okay, so STEM education means your science, technology, mathematics, engineering. So, at a national policy level, should such a policy be made that STEM education should be made mandatory from the grassroots school level, so that by the time that breed is reaching to the universities or colleges, they are that much prepared to cope up with the emerging disruptions?
You see, I think we have to look at the models of the societies which have done all these experiments and have succeeded. We should not invent the wheel from the from the start. And if you look at the Japanese society, the German society, or for that matter, the Scandinavian countries, they don't put so much load on their students or who are infants or young, 4, 5, 6, even at 10, 12 years of age. They are taught more skills, more social behaviors, other trainings before they are put into this rigorous sort of maths and engineering and all these sciences. So I think that is the way to go. Is first you make them, better start that process, because there are certain windows of opportunities, and those are those early years where you actually make a better human being, because later on it becomes very difficult, because otherwise those traits get ingrained. So I think it has to be a all-encompassing sort of an education, but not all this rote learning that we have. This present system does not work. That I'm very sure of. So it is great for these students who are sitting here to have come up from this sort of an education that we have and still have independent thought. So that is my independent thought, and questioning the status quo should be the hallmark of your students, and that is where the actual the nation goes forward.
All right. Next, agility is not just for the industry or corporate sector. It is also for regulators to enable stakeholders to collectively boost economic activity at national and international level.
I think you have something against the regulators because you are asking the second question about regulators. Yes, for sure. Definitely agreed. They have to be on their toes at what is going on, what is best, and how to change. A course correction is always required. You cannot make a decision today and say that it will be effective, and you cannot choose a direction and say that it will be the same after 10, 20, 50 years. You have to make course corrections as you go along, as the things and environment change. So they have to be agile.
Okay. So my next question also leads to, policy level thing. So creating real-time skill development opportunities for engineering students during the course of their academic journey at mega projects of national and strategic importance, or blaming engineering graduates with no hands-on skills and domain perspective.
I think creating real-time skill development opportunities, and I think it has, you can clap with both hands only, It is not only students, but the academia, the teachers, the faculty has to play a big role in this. That they have, so we are talking about the regulators, we are talking about the students, but you're not talking about the faculty. So they have to be agile also, to know what is happening in the real world and how they can train their students best.
A lot is ahead, so we do have a section for that as well. Don't worry. All right. So next is true multidisciplinary collaboration, the only way to help solve problems of Pakistan by providing local engineering solutions, enabling Pakistan to pay off its debt, or relying on miracles to happen?
I don't think anybody would subscribe to miracles to happen. Miracles do happen, but they only happen when you work hard. You have to choose your direction, and miracles will happen, but you have to make them happen.
Okay. So you do agree that multidisciplinary collaboration is the key?
Definitely.
Okay. Next, engaging students with the industry in the last semester, or engaging students with the industry quite early from 4th semester?
Why not the first semester?
Great. Okay. So I hope if industry is here and they're listening, so be ready, because people are there to support this cause of, bringing students on board from the first semester. All right. The thing which you were talking about, the academia thing. Surface learning or deep learning with better student engagement to enhance their learning?
I mean, there should not be any doubt, it has to be deep learning.
Okay, it's regulators, industry, and academia blaming each other for talent shortage, or seriously initiating and launching well-coordinated and institutionalized programs to ensure a continued trained talent pipeline, enabling all stakeholders to combat competitive pressures for survival.
The second one, it is too long what you have said, but actually that is the way to go. It has to be a well-coordinated effort, and we can talk at length about that also, what it has to be.
Next, CPAC, a project of strategic and national importance, or just cosmetic marketing activity at a very big socio-economic cost to Pakistan?
I think it's a project of strategic and national importance, but it is an opportunity that has been given to us, and it is for us now to how we make best use of it as a nation. We can either squander this opportunity, or we can make best use of it. This is up to us.
Great. So Khalid Saab, what is your take? I think we got some very interesting insights.
I think Dr. Saab has tremendous experience, more than 40 years in doing all this. And the challenge which we are facing today as a nation, as a academic institute, irrespective of which institute we are referring to, is market is asking for work-ready graduates. Now, every university has to comply with certain standards, and you cannot go beyond them, you cannot challenge them. The definition of university at one time was that, the intelligentsia of society gets together to solve societal problems. Now today, what UMT probably can solve or will be looking to solve is something different. Some other university will be looking to solve some other problem. But because of we have to think within the box because of the environment which is created. You cannot go out of it without naming what you referred to before, the regulators. So within the box, when you have to operate, then you stay within the box. And your national problems keep on compounding. And because of lack of engineering push in Pakistan, we have been forced to import everything. And that has led to a very big financial deficit, which has led to currency depreciation, which has led to inflation, which has led to food inflation. So I think to correct the whole equation, we really need academia to come forward, industry to hold hands with academia, and regulators and government has to come forward to facilitate and create the opportunity so that interventions can be created whereby we can solve the socioeconomic problems. And like the way Dr. Saab said that, miracles do happen, but you have to make them happen. The way China has made it happen, 50% of population out of poverty line within no time, amazing. So it was a miracle, but they made it happen. So I think great. Thank you very much for your insights and for supporting the thought. Sarah?
Yeah. Next. So now we will quickly dive into the second section, which is quick takes. And in that section, 2 statements will be provided to him and to the audience as well. And if you agree to that statement, you will show green card. And if you disagree, you will show red card. So let's dive into the second section, which is quick takes. Second section, which is of quick takes, is going to start. So, sir, now 2 statements will be given to you. If you agree, you will show green. If you disagree, you will show red card. The first statement is that engineering graduate is expected to be smart with strong problem-solving skills, to have the ability to talk to other domains and keep communication flowing, and should have deep understanding of processes. You agree or you disagree?
I would agree with this statement.
All right, great. Majority agrees. Okay. All right. Second is institutions to be provided a reasonable freedom to introduce new innovative roadmaps designed in collaboration of subject matter experts from both industry and academia as per emerging skill requirements, to enhance or increase the depth and width of learning experience for the students. Agree. Great. Academic regulators should adopt practices of appropriately documented economies in Pakistan, less documented economy to measure the engineering employment data, or should they create local solutions for relevance?
इसका just like to give a clarity. बहुत सारी जो बॉडीज़ पाकिस्तान में हैं इस वक्त वेस्ट की थॉट कि वहाँ पे सोशल सिक्योरिटी नंबर होता है, एवरीथिंग इज़ डॉक्यूमेंटेड. वही सिनेरियो पाकिस्तान में लाके इम्प्लीमेंट करना चाह रहे हैं जब हमारे पास डॉक्यूमेंटेड कुछ भी नहीं है.
I think we have to find our local solutions to our local problems. No imposed solution or no imposed sort of model can be there. We have to find our own solutions to fit our own sort of circumstances.
So you disagree?
So I disagree.
And what about the audience? They disagree. Few, okay, disagree. Okay, next.
इसमें मैं इकबाल का एक शेर पढ़ता हूँ दोबारा से कि क़यास अपनी मिल्लत पे अक़वाम मग़रिब से न कर, क़यास अपनी मिल्लत पे अक़वाम मग़रिब से न कर, ख़ास है तरकीब में कौम रसूल हाशमी.
Next, should we blindly follow the recommendations of advisors coming from different culture, or should tailor them as per the local needs?
I think the answer is,
you have already said
that.
that.
You have already answered that.
Okay, industry-academia linkage in Pakistan is just an overused term with no consequence, as both are operating in absolutely different directions, hardly resulting in generating any meaningful practical interest due to fragmenting piecemeal attempts.
Agreed.
Agreed. All right. This is important, and I would like to see if you would like to add a new quotient in the next question. Regulators, industry, and academia need to work together to ensure that the graduates coming out of the academic system have all quotients, including intelligence quotient, technical quotient, technology quotient, emotional quotient, and cultural quotient for solving the societal problems and the widespread issue of talent shortage?
I would agree with that, again, add something to it. You see, the best you can do is give you're trying to say that your student should come out and he should be a perfect fit and he would go in and fit into a puzzle just like that and would start working. I would tend to sort of little bit disagree with that, in the sense that you have to give him that passion. Above all, whatever skills you give him, whatever, a passion and a desire for learning, to work for his country honestly, to keep on learning throughout his life, and to contribute to the society and to his fellow human beings. I think if that is missing, and which is missing these days, not only in engineering education, but in all spheres of our education sector, then you have problems which as a society we are facing today. So this is my...
So the faculty has a very interesting and a very important responsibility on their shoulders to ensure that the student, really learns a lot during the classroom culture, and they get successful in making them passionate enough for their domain and to pay back to the society. All right, getting upset on non-viable final year projects of students, or better playing a mentoring role by mentoring students early prior the selection of their FYPs?
Yes, second one.
You agreeing to this? Okay. Okay, students in universities must be made part of the mega national projects through paid internships, apprenticeships, project-based assignments, enabling them to have meaningful work and to develop the technical and professional skills required in their field. It will also create transfer of technology.
I would agree to a certain extent on this, that they have to at least see and gauge what a mega project is, whether they are, because any mega project has, or any project has, a limited assimilative capacity. Whether they should work or they should look after these, graduates or students, but definitely they should be made to go to these projects, and there should be a government program, not only by the universities or things, but there should be a government program in which these students are taken and they are shown, because there's so much, it will enhance their skills, they will see by their own eye. Seeing is believing. And we always say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and a visit is worth maybe a million photographs. So you go there and you see, and that is a lifelong experience sometimes, in a day what you can learn from there. So yes, definitely there should be a program in which the students are thrown into the practical life, and they see from themselves what is happening. And the benefit that will also happen is some of the negativity that we have in our society these days about everything being wrong about the country will go away, because they will see the positivity and the positive things that are happening in the country.
Absolutely right. Next, feeling helpless while facing students with weakened domain knowledge and perspective, or taking ownership of students and engaging them from early years at university, which what you were saying that why not from the first semester? So you agree to this. Okay. This is, the next thing is salary as per the potential of the job and candidate, or salary as per the last salary slip?
Difficult one. We say either you have, somebody told me once, either you have to be earning or you have to be learning. The best place is where you are earning and you are learning. So you combine those, even if your pay is a little bit less, but you think that you are learning, then go for that job. If somebody pays you high, but it's a dead-up job, then you don't go there, because you're going to end up someplace which you don't like after 20 years. So that balance, some or the other, has to come in.
Okay. Do you agree that millennials and Generation Z, the generation of today, is seeping into the workforce, bringing an absolutely new attitude to employment?
I don't agree to that.
Okay. Okay, so I would like to understand that why you don't agree.
You see, our generation, this new generation is better than us. Let me be very frank. They have more skill sets, they have more enthusiasm, they have got more energy, they have got more possibilities, they have got immense knowledge floating around them in terms of internet and libraries, that virtual libraries and things that they can do. What is lacking is honest hard work. All these things have made them complacent and easygoing. There is no, as they say, you have to take the stairs and not the lift if you want to succeed. There is no shortcut to success. It's only through hard work. जब हम पढ़ते होते थे, अब हमसे कहा जाता था, हमारे कुछ उस्तादों ने, ये आप देखें कि आजकल हिंदू और इंडियंस, मैं मिसाल नहीं देना चाहता, बट ये एकेडेमिया में ये लोग बड़े एकेडेमिक्स में बड़े आगे चले गए हुए हैं. तो हमें कहा जाता था कि आपको पता है कि हिंदू पढ़ता कैसे है. वो ऐसे कि वो हिंदुओं के अक्सर आपने देखा होगा, वो जो होते थे पुराने, वो बोधी रखते थे, वो ऐसे जो आजकल के लड़के भी कुछ रख लेते हैं. आई डोंट नो वो किस तरीके से उन्होंने धागे भी बांधे होते हैं वगैरह वगैरह, बट दैट्स अ डिफरेंट टॉपिक एंड डिफरेंट दिस थिंग फॉर अनदर टाइम. तो वो कहते थे कि जब वो पढ़ने बैठता है हिंदू, तो वो अपने बालों को एक रस्सी से बांध के उसको छत के साथ ऊपर बांध देता है और वो बैठ के पढ़ता है, ताकि अगर उसको कभी नींद आए और ऊँग आ जाए ऐसे करके, तो वो बाल ऐसे उसके खिंचे और वो दोबारा जाग जाए. मतलब ये है कि उस पैशन के साथ और उस कमिटमेंट के साथ आपने मेहनत करनी है, तो फिर मिरेकल होगा.
All right. Next, 9 to 6 job is an obsolete thing now.
I think, yes. It is, especially this COVID has sort of, the new paradigm, it's video conferencing, working from home, and flexible hours. So it is catching up. But again, you see that honesty of what we found out, because we went through this 2 years of this COVID, and we said, okay, there were times that they said close the offices, nobody is coming, or 50% workforce. What do? This is a national importance project, you can't close the project. So we said, okay, you work from home. Then the question came, can you trust the people that they will work from home? But they'll be honest and deliver. And that was a big challenge. So unless that culture is created, yes, worldwide this is an obsolete thing, but we have to create that culture and that honesty in our society to make that obsolete here also.
And what is the take of the students on this? Do you agree that 9 to 6 job is an obsolete thing, or is it just... Okay, they also agree. Okay, next. Sir, I want to take your opinion. Would you prefer formal dressing at work or lounge dressing with work from home?
Again, it's a difficult thing. I have not worn a tie today. So I'm a little bit informal.
Okay.
I'm a civil engineer, so I like, wearing informal clothes. I have to go to sites, and it's a different ball game there, and getting dirty and all that. So it's a combination, you see. There are occasions where you have to dress formally, but most of the time it should be sort of easygoing. But there has to be a decorum. It cannot be just lounge dressing for,
Okay.
There has to be a little bit, there has to be a red line someplace.
Sure. Okay, next one is interesting. Generational intelligence at work. I'm talking about the leadership perspective, because you are basically, mashallah, heading a very big project. So generational intelligence at work is the formula to success when it comes to finding and retaining innovative talent with equally innovative ideas.
Here the generational intelligence means different age brackets.
You see,
X, Y, Z, baby boomers.
if you talk about leadership role basically, and seniors mentoring their juniors, and a senior has to have that intelligence to ensure, and an intelligent senior would be a confident senior, and he will install confidence in his juniors. If the senior is not intelligent and he is not at that level, he will not command that respect, though the juniors will still be working for him. So yes.
Okay. Companies that are reluctant to revamp their HR practices and reimagine output measurements will soon find themselves at a disadvantage.
If you're talking about hundreds-year-old HR practices, which are sometimes still practiced in some spheres here, yes, I agree to that. We have to have a paradigm shift in our HR practices, and but then again, it's a two-way street. You know, the employees should also be that much honest in their work.
All right. Impeding young talent to grow because of obsolete seniority-based HR practices, or rewarding and retaining them for their contributions and performance earned even in short span of time.
100% agreed.
Okay. So this was our second section, which was quick takes. And Khalid Saab, what is your understanding?
Sir has thrown a lot of light on a lot of things, and he's a seasoned, experienced guy, so we respect all of his judgments. The thought behind the whole thing was, in a projects of national importance, if you really look at them, we are taking loans from abroad and we are engaging a lot of local resources also. And even these local resources have a very big foreign component. We cannot make them without that foreign component. So we end up into a quagmire of very big foreign debt. And it's something which keeps you up at night at times if you are a financial exchequer of the country. The other thing is that now the only way, or possibly one of the ways, as you have also indicated in your talks, is that we need to nurture the local industry, and for that we need to nurture local talent, and we have to come up with the local solutions, which means maybe through regulators, by Government of Pakistan, Ministry of Production or whatever, a policy be recommended or made that, you know, for all the foreign loans and the strategic projects of national importance we are taking, the university students will have to spend 1 year there on the job, so that transfer of technology, transfer of skill, learning can takes place, and you know, they can quickly grow in their domains, and in next 5 years' time, they have the ability to, you know, produce the same thing themselves. They don't need foreign consultants, they don't need foreign manufacturers, and maybe local industry will also come up if we do for multi-disciplinary collaboration, whereby civil, mechanical, electrical things are, you know, put together in a perspective. So what is happening? We are taking very big loans, but what we are not working on human development, human capital development, which should be part of those loan programs, that X percentage of deletion, even in terms of, not only in terms of technology, in terms of man hour should also be done, and they should be replaced by the locals. So that was a guiding principle overall, and then, you know, we have the regulatory environment, we have the other old thought, managing our institutions. People are not moving away from the practices which have been abandoned by the West. So moving forward, we were trying to get your thoughts on this perspective, which you have very nicely stated. Actually, we got all the answers right? Yeah. So excellent, thank you for that, sir. So Sarah, please.
And now we will dive into the third section, which is perspective. All right, so the third section is the perspective. As you know, that in this section, what we do, we invite another guest, and you know, in this podcast, the beauty is that either it's representative from the industry or academia, they are representing themselves irrespective of any specific organization. And in this section, we will be putting allegations to both industry and academia, and they have put into the doc, as you can see. And now allegations will be put on them and they have to defend it. But prior diving into this segment, I would like to introduce our another guest, Mr. Farhan Daud Qazi, who is basically the assistant professor at the School of Engineering at UMT, and he is basically teaching in the industrial engineering domain. He has more than 20 years diversified experience locally and internationally in teaching, in consulting, and as well as in the industry. So welcome on board. And
welcome in the dock.
Yeah, welcome in the dock. All right. So first allegations will be put on the industry. So sir, you are ready to face the allegations?
I'm not ready.
You are not ready, but you have to be ready because this is the requirement. Okay. So the first thing is, a lot is said and known about the problems caused by the talent shortage in engineering, but engineering firms are still struggling to have a strong HR department to build talent at the right and desired time.
I think you're right.
Okay, so you are.
I agree with that.
So you are agreeing to be guilty.
I am agreeing to be guilty. That I think the industry in many places have not kept up with the practices, and their HR department should be attracting the best talent and grooming it, and they are not probably doing the best job.
Okay, so the audience agrees or disagrees? Agrees. So audience has also declared you guilty. Okay, the second allegation is, though many companies say they are preparing for the millennial shift, but still there is a gap between what engineering companies can provide and what millennial workers are looking for.
Guilty. Quick confession.
Next, engineering sector in Pakistan is not focusing on transferring knowledge and skill to Pakistan, but they are comfortable working under foreign consultants and engineers.
Don't agree.
Don't agree.
We are doing the Amir Bhasha Dam, which is a consortium of 6 firms. There are 3 foreign firms. Some of the largest foreign firms in the world in engineering, Stantec from USA and Canada, and AFRI from Switzerland and Sweden, and Dolser from Turkey. And NASPAC, being a local firm, is in the lead in this project.
So this is
So
a bailout point actually. You scored it well, played it well.
No efforts are being made in Pakistan at any level to go for design engineering and manufacturing. Rather, we are import dependent upon turbines, solar panels, even spare parts for cars.
partially agree and partially disagree. Because in various sectors, things are being done for design engineering, and but in many other there is a lot of gap. Yes, so we have to bridge that gap, and as a nation we have to rise to that.
So you are guilty.
You are guilty to that extent, but I think it's a combination. You cannot blame the engineering community for not delivering. There are other host of factors that come into play and make this happen. But we have, as we said, we have to challenge the status quo.
Yeah. Okay. Next, engineering companies are not willing to offer good careers or pay good salaries, resulting in low morale of engineers and lack of desire to learn.
Disagree.
Disagree.
Many engineering firms offer very good salary packages. Many of the graduates who do this in many other fields not related to engineering get lower pay than that, and they have to put in, I know, because I have now children of that age which who have gone into different fields, and they get lower pay than engineers at the start. So no, I don't agree with that. Pays are good.
So you're happy with the pay scale of engineers?
I'm not happy in the sense, overall I think the technical manpower in Pakistan is low paid compared to other societies. And engineering by default has been a profession which has been low paid in many other societies, even developed world, compared to other, like there are many other fields. So I don't know the reason, because the type of education that engineers have to get, the type of hard work that they have to do, the challenges that they face, the work that they have to do, they should be one of the highest paid professionals in the world, which unfortunately is not the case. Our work is undervalued.
So you mean the engineering community has done nothing to put it to proper valuation?
Proper valuation, yes.
So you're guilty on that part?
We are on, yes, of course.
So you really need to go...
We have to do more marketing.
Or lobbying maybe.
Lobbying.
Yeah, with the government.
Okay, so I guess that you played pretty well. And now we will move to the academia side, and we will be putting allegations in you. So as you know that today we discussed about the cooperative education program, the idea which we are promoting to blend the theory with practice and adjust the roadmaps accordingly so that more students can be placed on the apprenticeships and internships. So in that regard, the first thing is cooperative education partnerships between industries and universities are becoming increasingly common in response to fundamental challenges facing both sectors, but somehow academia is not coming up to institutionalize such efforts.
I would disagree. Academia does extend itself and does reach out to industry more often than not. But mostly industry is somehow closed in a shell. They are constantly, if I would say, concretely coming up with solutions, and even though taking baby steps, those are absent there. So from that perspective, I think if I say that maybe industry as an elder brother should be taking the leap forward and embracing the students and the faculty and the institutions, I think that should be the way to go. But then...
You are alleging industry, so industry doesn't respond to this allegation. You're not doing enough for these guys.
I think, again, I would take the middle ground. It's a both-way street, two-way street. We need people who have been given a certain skill set, and above all, to work as a team and to excel, not individually, but as a team, and be compassionate about their work and to learn more new things, have a passion to learn. That is missing in the new generation that is coming out to us. So even if you have like topper with a, I don't know, these days they're called theta somehow. The other
Thetas, yeah.
Thetas, and this is a new term that I've learned from my children,
It's
So
like sine theta and cos theta.
Sine theta, cos theta, tan theta. But if you get a theta, most of the time I've seen, I had to actually fire a theta from my organization because that person was not working. It's a compartment they were working, whereas you require a teamwork in organizations.
So you can't throw the blame on industry purely, so you have to take the partial blame on yourself and try and work around grooming the students so that they can collaborate, work as a team, and they can communicate also, and they have reasonable good knowledge. They are not expecting them to be superstars, from the word go, but they should have the ability to work as a team and be productive.
To that extent, blame, guilty as charged. To that extent, guilty as charged, we're willing to take the first step.
Right. So on one count he is confirmed.
Okay.
Move next.
Has the potential to give university a competitive advantage, a positive identity, and an enhanced goodwill within the society by providing relevant skill set, but academia has not been able to institutionalize and institutionalize such kind of initiative and move forward with the industry.
And this is not a measure in your grading system also.
Yeah.
It
So
takes,
GPA should have two categories.
It takes two to make a quality. co-op program without industry doesn't work. If industry is not stepping out and not joining hands, we going out and devising a co-op program, coming up with a co-op program with our students doing nothing. I mean, when they go to industry and there is no co-supervisor there, we have a supervisor here in the university. So on one hand, it has to be a mutual effort, both by academia and industry. On the second count, yes, when it comes to us, it has to be, again, mutual effort by industry and academia, devising a program completely. In certain cases, it would be restricted by some accrediting bodies. For example, PEC might not allow it as easily. There is some status quo there. It's pretty much well known. For some good reasons or bad, it's there. However, in certain other cases where accrediting bodies, they do not impose any restriction, it is entirely possible. And it should be done in collaboration with industry, and it should be, work well for all the stakeholders.
Excellent. So we need to find middle ground somewhere whereby the infringement is not taking place with the regulators, and then we can join hands and move together. Sure. So fine. So this is one area.
He is partially guilty?
He is fully guilty, actually.
Okay, fully guilty. Okay. Generally, teachers lack industrial experience, resulting in reluctance to bring industry on board.
Well, it's a serious challenge, serious allegation.
You're guilty.
Guilty.
I think you're accepting.
Generally speaking, yes.
But I think
Sir,
industry is also to be blamed on this account. He is not that much guilty as he has said. Because in foreign universities, I've seen that professors are actually engaged by the industry to work on their projects. Whenever there is a problem, like for example, we are facing some questions about sedimentation in the Amar Bhasha Dam. And whom do we consult now? It's Professor Anton Schleiss from Switzerland, because we were told that he is the world expert, and he has put in he is now 70 years old. So we have reached out to him, and we have asked him certain questions and things like that. We were facing some problems in glacier studies for the Amar Bhasha Dam, because a lot of this water comes from glaciers in Himalayas and Karakorams, and there were apprehensions about glacier lake outburst floods, which are called GLOFs. So then whom do we reach out? We reached out to another professor in the UK university who's an expert in this field, and we asked him certain questions, and he had a report. Then he gave us that report, Professor Reynolds. So so I think that has to be the idea that the professors and sometimes the research assistants work on these projects for specialized inputs.
So academia has not been able to create comfort for the industry for their sensitive areas whereby they need your assistance, but you have failed to market yourself well, or maybe you don't have the capability, we don't know.
Maybe in Pakistan, it's not as easy as it seems. In the Western world, if I say that all research, of course, probably 90% of research, the budget spent on the research in even the topmost universities, that does not necessarily result into some fruitful product. But it's that remaining 5 to 10% chunk that bears fruit eventually, resulting into products and something really critical for overall evolution. But in that regard, industry does not turn the face from those university professors. And here in Pakistan, somehow, industry does close its door. The professors here, in certain sectors, if I say, for example, in certain engineering education, civil engineers, they do engage themselves in many problems, industrial problems, be it structures or some other fields. But when it comes to other engineering fields, there is less and less involvement of academic people in the industry. So I would say, yes, in some way, it's our fault as well, the academics. But on the other hand, maybe the industry should be reaching out to, just like they reached out to the Switzerland professor, to the UK professor.
So here the challenge is different. They are looking at over-the-shelf solutions. They know a professor, he has a credibility, he has a history. Reach out to him, get the solution made, and do it, and they trust his capability level, right? True. So maybe, and as you said, you very rightly said that 9 out of 10 new innovations will fail even in America, despite of all the funding and everything. But your challenge is now to have a core capability, package it well, market it well, create international credentials so that the industry can trust you and give you money for all the works, and they can buy your things over the counter also.
Absolutely.
So this is where they are failing. So they are failing miserably, actually. So that's a very serious allegation, and he's guilty. Next.
Okay, last allegation in academia. Entrepreneurship can be taught in the classroom. Just accredit our course, right? Mm-hmm. And resulting students' final year projects to lack the capability to get converted into a full-time product.
Right. When it comes to entrepreneurship, it's not just local phenomenon. If I could really, in terms of percentage, in the rate of growth of entrepreneurial projects, if I could, compare it with those in the developed world, I would say the rate of growth in Pakistan is much higher at the moment. Rate of entrepreneurs who start their entrepreneurial journey immediately after education, immediately after undergrad. So at this moment, our rate of growth is much higher than them. Whether or not they would be successful, that's a different ball game, because about 60 to 70% entrepreneurial projects, they usually fail, particularly for those who start immediately after their studies. We take examples of very rare cases, very exceptional cases when it comes to Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or the people of that stature. But what we forget is even Chida Panwala was an entrepreneur probably. And similarly, there are so many other smaller cases, smaller case studies. So entrepreneurship, it's not just those big industry that may not necessarily result into those big ventures. It may very well result into something different, something small at a different point, at a different location. Might not be that scalable, but it does work. As far as your question is concerned, that it cannot be taught, it can be taught, it is taught, and people do learn. But not everyone is meant for being an entrepreneur, same as not everyone is meant to be, as a good employee.
Okay, so let me make a quite brutal comment over here, right? Because finally, they are in a situation. So, for example, if I am, a master's in HR.
Before you take your time to think. You see, he has rightly said the average age of successful startup worldwide is 42 years.
Yeah.
And it takes 10 years for a new startup to become an enterprise whereby you can trust this is a company.
Yeah.
So these two challenges are there. And this part is just fine. The challenge is how to germinate ideas in a classroom.
Yeah, this is
why a teacher who has never done any business.
Yeah, this is what I am saying. So if I have done masters in marketing or HR or in any other discipline, and I've never worked anywhere in the industry, so can I teach a crowd of students who are going to be aspiring entrepreneurs? Can I teach them?
You can teach them, but you shouldn't be teaching them entrepreneurship.
This is what I'm asking. This is exactly what I'm asking.
Yeah. So entrepreneurship is generally, to my information, it's taught by those people who know what it is, who have had some experiences, and who know what industry works, how industry works. So I take it in fact for granted that when a teacher is standing there in front of the students, that teacher has all the capability necessary to communicate, to transfer what is meant, what that person is meant to transfer. So
it was a good sugar-coated, politically corrected answer.
Very, very good. That entrepreneurship and academia.
Entrepreneurship, any skill can be taught and learnt. It has to be taught by the right person, and the person who is receiving should be open to that, and he should again, so be willing to put in that. People talk about Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or
Elon Musk
and thing, but look at the hard work that they have initially years. They were working from their garage and all those and things like that. So yes, skills can be learned, but they should be taught by those who have actually been through the journey.
So basically, to summarize his thoughts also,
Yeah.
very relevant. I mean, if you can't burn candles, don't try to be entrepreneur. Right? So that's great. So any more questions?
no, you just have to give your final word to that, who is actually
we need
the...
verdict from Dr. Saab. In his opinion, in co-op industry, academia, the contribution of industry is negligible, reasonable, or it is the most one can have, and you have to give a judgment whether you are guilty of not cooperating with academia or not, sir.
I think I always say that you cannot solve a problem unless you accept that there is a problem. So I think we have started accepting that there is a problem, and we have started on the right track. So inshallah, when you have accepted a situation, that solution will come.
Great. Very good, sir. So you are for sure guilty, right? Because it's a very nice way of confession, diplomatic confession. So, sir, your take. Are you guilty or not? I think you're very, very guilty.
I take the responsibility. I am that part of, when it's by dint of my profession, I must admit, even if it's not my fault, I must admit it's my fault. Because I am the one who has to lead from the front. I am the one who has to show my students what it takes to take the blame, and only then we can start learning and building on new things.
Great. So he has taken the responsibility. Sir has declared that he is guilty but not responsible. He is responsible and guilty both. So we need to find a common path now, whereby they can both work together and we can produce the future leaders in the domain of engineering, so that we are not dependent upon professors overseas or manufacturers in some other country. We can do it all in Pakistan.
Yeah, so now the last section is FaceTime, which is 1 minute section, and opportunity will be given to both of the stakeholders to actually pitch give a pitch on a certain idea, which will be thrown their way. So let's dive into the last 1 minute section, which is FaceTime. All right, so the final section finally has arrived, which is FaceTime, and in this section 1 minute will be given to both of the stakeholders from the industry and academia to pitch and sell the concept within 1 minute, which we are going to ask them now. So sir, you have to pitch in 1 minute that how you're going to promote engineering education to the new millennials, and what should their target be during academic journey, and what should they expect in their careers.
There is nothing better than being an engineer in the coming times. A lot of challenges, the horizons, the projects, we are breaking new boundaries, building higher, going deeper, and we need the young generation with the passion and with the commitment and the knowledge to undertake those projects. And on top of that, you have to become leaders, not only in engineering, but in your society. And with your skill set, you have all the, you have the ability and the skill set to do that, to become a very effective part of a society. So Pakistan needs engineers, and you are the future.
Very nice. I'm really impressed. He actually did it in 1 minute. So the first one who has done it in 1 minute. Okay, so now the challenge is given to you.
मेरा ये वाला नहीं है?
No.
मैं खामखा तैयार कर रहा था.
No rote education.
Yeah.
छोटा सा है वो.
All right. So 1 minute is given to you to pitch to the potential students why should one consider UMT for pursuing engineering education, keeping in view the new normal?
UMT, it's not really...
MITs of Pakistan?
it's not MIT of Pakistan, accepted. But we have gathered with us the faculty, the infrastructure, and the intentions, all the good intentions with us. And with those intentions, which are, I think, the passion that is needed in the leadership, in the teachers, and increasingly amongst the students, I would say that these are all the ingredients which are needed for any university, for any, particularly in engineering profession, to become successful. So with all these ingredients in place, I urge all of you to join UMT Engineering.
For transformative transfer.
If I may add, a journey of 1,000 miles
Begin with a single
begin with this first step. UMT has taken that first step in the right direction, and they are on that 1,000-mile journey. So become a part of that journey with them, so that they reach their destination.
So, great thing is that Dr. Tahir Mahmood Saab has become ambassador of UMT, and he has,
He has become ambassador of co-op program in Pakistan, because UMT has a habit of sowing seeds, and then we want to see not only UMT growing, but the nation overall growing. And his last statement, I think, has summarized everything, that this is a journey, this is a route to be taken. Your GPS should be set, your navigation should be set. We have to go towards co-op program, and co-op program has to be promoted, and it's a long journey. There are a lot of challenges, but all those challenges, once you start moving, you keep, with agile framework, you'll keep on finding solutions, and you'll get to the destination which Pakistan needs badly to create future leaders who can really transform the society and economy and their own personal lives. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so very much. And this will only be possible with the collaboration of industry and academia, and as well as regulators. And we will keep, advocating the same cause of national interest. Thank you so very much of your time. And, we are really grateful to you. Thank you.